Welcome to Pinball Mayhem. My name is Jeremy, and today we're going to tackle working on a little heart operation for the Shuffle Alley. We're going to work on the score motor. The reason why I say it's the heart of the operation is it gives the pulses for all the resets and all the scores and everything, does multiplication with various relays and whatnot, so it's got to be working good all the time. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything scores or resets or whatnot. So first time I've done one, so we'll go through it together and I'll move the camera and we'll get started. Okay, here we go. What I've been working on is I got all the top units done at this point. They cleaned up really nicely and they all work real good. And just finished up with these units here. I did have to replace this bar on this one with a spare I had. The joint right here was real loose. So we move it up a bit and it snaps back beautifully. So we're going to look at the score motor. So here we go. We got the switches, and on the back side we've got all the rivets and everything that'll need to be cleaned. So just going to tear that apart, and I will come back here with various bits as I work on them. Pulled off the outer cam very carefully, making sure that the switches didn't get bent. When I reassemble it, depending on the length of the wires, I may have the cam on first, or I may do what I just did, put the cam back on with the switches already in place. Interesting thing to note, for me to get that cam off, this one was a little difficult, so I ended up lightly tapping with a very tiny hammer the cam further in, then putting some penetrating fluid on here like WD-40, and then I was able to slide it back without forcing it, and that worked out good. I've also got this piece off. That was really easy to get that spider off. That came off perfectly, and looks like I'm missing a screw on the bottom, but what they decided to do when they mounted this was use one up top, and there's one sneaking up over here. So my next thing is probably going to be to loosen up the motor bracket, and then I'll pull off the switches. Got the score motor pulled out, pulled off all the switches off of this plate here, and that went pretty good. I took pictures as I went along just to make sure everything gets back in its place. I also unsoldered the motor. There's only 2 wires on there. It's pretty easy. I'm going to go and split this case just because I want everything to be really good in this, although this motor seems pretty darn nice. Another thing you watch out for is this. This is a spring-loaded clutch mechanism, and it should pop out pretty much like that. It'll be a little smoother once I'm done with it, but this one's actually pretty good. And just the usual stuff with this disc. We'll clean all those rivets and whatnot, and I'll clean all the switches and we'll put her back together. Here we have the rivet side of the score motor, and because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, you know, this piece is directly against the reels, so when you open the back door you don't really see it, and when you open the front, when the back door is closed, this piece is directly against the side of the cabinet, so it doesn't really get much attention unless something's going wrong with it. As you can see, we are quite dirty in here, some old grease and whatnot, so I'm just going to show you how I clean that. I'm going to start with rubbing alcohol, or isopropyl alcohol I should say. This stuff's 91%, try to get the highest you can. And I'm just going to work it around with the paper towel here, quite black. Try to get most of it off. Alright. So I'm reaching over here and grabbing old toothbrush. Going to put some alcohol on the toothbrush here. And we'll just go to town cleaning this guy. And dirt track on the inside is actually coming off. Still quite a bit of dirt. Well, it's looking a lot better already. Okay, that actually looks real decent. That would probably be good enough. But not for me. Here's a technique I use instead of sanding or steel wool or 3M Scotch-Brite. I use Brasso. Now, I like to use Brasso because it works quickly, efficiently. Main thing is you got to make sure to get it all off. Wipe it off and also hit it with isopropyl alcohol afterward. Alright. Just work it around here. Let it do its magic. Now, luckily I'm doing this on concrete floor. Got a nice splotch on the ground here. Just pick it up, spread it around. Grab a fresh paper towel, because this is basically just sort of an acidic product. Comes out quite yucky, but it works really good, and speed's the main thing. And you're also not removing material. It's the problem with sanding. You're actually removing the top section. Get my other toothbrush with the rubbing alcohol. Just to make sure I get all of that chemical out from around the rivets. And as you can see, pretty much like new. Can also evaluate it, look for the worn out ones. There's a couple up top here that got some darker marks. I might go back with a little bit more cleaner. But overall, I'm really quite happy with how it turned out. And I'll just put a little bit of this stuff on, and we'll work on the rest of these switches and whatnot, and we're done with this. Alright, time to turn on the score motor itself. Okay, we just look at the score motor here. We got UMC on it, which possibly means United built these on their own. I'm not positive. Number 6121A, which is what the sticker says on there. Not sure what 82 is, probably serial number. And this is the boss where the spring-mounted spring is in there for the motor shaft. And first we'll start by taking off these two screws, and the armature will pop off along with the motor shaft. Now these were not very tight at all, or this one wasn't. Let's check this one. This one's in there pretty good. Okay, we do have a lock washer on it. So we'll just very carefully pull this off. Okay. This is the armature here. And then we've got motor shaft itself. We got a little bit of burnishing on here, so this isn't, I'm not going to force it off. I'll clean this off first before I pull that off, but got a series of washers to space it out. And these are the pipes for lubrication. And then we're just left with the gearbox. Okay. I think I'll pull that out next, if it'll come out. Okay, it wasn't too much to loosen it. Just carefully remove that. We've got a spring. And we got the small pointed piece that rides on the end of this. So, something to watch out for when we're reassembling it. So we'll put this in first, then this little piece will go next. I'm going to drill the rivets for the gearbox. I'll have to put screws and nuts to retain it again, but that won't be a problem. And we'll come back after I got that apart. Alright, I've drilled the rivets out. And I've used my pin punch here to force them all out. Once I don't want to drill into the case. Once I open the case up, then I'll work on pulling these all the way out. So, let's see how it's put together. I want to be careful because I don't want to damage the mating surface on here if I can avoid it. Probably some pins that are in there. Help line it all up. I certainly don't want to pound on the end of the shaft. I don't want to mushroom it out. Let's grab my X-Acto knife. There we go. Just took a little careful prying. Not sure what side the gears are going to be sitting on. Okay. Looks like they're all on this side. Let's see if this will come off. Alright, good. And here we are. Looks quite nice in there. So all I'm going to do is pull these gears out, wipe everything down, put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, then put some lubrication back into it. Okay, I've got a washer there. There's no washer on this side, but I can see a washer inside there. Oh, I see what we got. We got a big spacer right here. Okay. That's good to know. There's no washer in there. No washer in there. See, now that gear, this second gear here has gotten a lot of use. The lubricant's all burned up on it. So, definitely a good idea to take it apart, clean it up. Yep. You can see it right there. It's a plastic gear, pretty fragile, but it's thick enough that lasted quite well. Not sure about soaking this in the ultrasonic cleaner. I probably won't soak this part. I'll probably soak it halfway up to this bearing. Because around this bearing there's going to be some felt-like material. And that's to absorb the oil. And I don't want to disturb that at all. This side does not have anything like that. So the whole case on this side will go in after I wipe it down. And I'll just clean it up to about here. And we'll be back. Alrighty, we got everything cleaned up here, and I just thought I'd lay everything out for you, see how it turned out. Put this whole thing in the ultrasonic cleaner, turned out great. I only put 3/4 of this in. I didn't want to soak this upper part because there's a felt piece behind here that soaks up the oil. I didn't want that to get soaked up with solvent. And this turned out great. So for inspecting stuff, it's a good thing I took this apart. Because as you can see here, the plastic gear has been rubbing on there. Now, why has it been doing that? Probably just when it was assembled, because this piece is the spacer, and on the end of this long shaft are the wipers that go on the score motor disc. And when this is all assembled fully, we get a light amount of scraping on here. And how can I take care of that? Well, my initial idea was just to grab any old washer out of my parts bin and put it on there. And what happened was it was a little too thick. There's not a whole lot of play in the box when it's closed, so I just found a thin washer that I had. It's going to be my spacer. And now it's much better. I'm just pressing down on the gear so the gear will flex. It'll scrape it a little bit, but during operation it'll be way better than what it was, and it won't be slowed down by that gear, because that's the downside of what was happening. The score motor will slow down some, your scoring is going to be slower, of course, your numbers won't reset as fast, and just not going to be like it's supposed to be. So I'll pull this out here and we'll take an inspection. Another reason why I'm glad I pulled this apart. If we look on the shaft there, it's probably not really blued from heat, but they're dark, and that's probably because of some heat buildup on here. When this is assembled, there's really no way to put extra lubrication on this back part. The only lubrication is on the top end, where it's spinning the fastest, which is understandable. But and though it does need the most lubrication for the motor, but because these bearings will soak up oil, I've just been hitting them with a lot of oil now to get them to soak up as much as I can, and it'll be good for certainly as long as I own it. Now I pulled out the rivets, the original rivets on here, drilled them out carefully. I didn't drill through the case, so the inside diameter is still the same. And here's what I came up with. Just some little bolts and washers, and this probably what would have worked best is like a 440 or something like that, but my local Menards is who I have, or Home Depot is another competitor, did not have that small of American size, so I went with a metric size, which they did have, and that happens to be 3mm. So here's what I ended up using. This just worked out great. 3mm by 16, so I don't have to cut the longer ones. And I'll put a little bit of Loctite on here when I put it on, and that'll work great. Just checking out all the little parts. I'll find some proper lubricant to put in here, and again, it's not critical what kind of lubricant you put in here, just as long as it's something, and keeps things moving along, and we'll put her together. Okay, got everything assembled, and the main thing when it's back together is the armature spins in there very nicely, and it resets. There's a spring in here that we saw earlier that just the action is really good. Now on these pipes, as I mentioned before, I've been soaking them with oil quite a bit just to get everything fully saturated, and we'll just plug it in here and give her a quick test. Runs off of 50 volts. We'll just get it up close to the mic here. Sounds good. It's rated for 20. This motor is rated for 22 revolutions per minute, and in timing it, it's like 21 3/4, which is certainly good. We put some load on it here. Sounds good. We've got just a little bit of play in the shaft, which that washer took up, so the gear's not grinding on this side anymore. And the armatures, as we watch the armature, it just spins real nice. So I am very happy with how that works. And next step is to clean up the bracket and everything and reassemble stuff, and I'll have to clean all those switches next. So that'll be fun. On to the next part. Alright, I've finished up with the score motor, and just some notes on reassembly is I cleaned all the contacts and made sure that there wasn't too much downward force on the disc here. And then after I had all the switches installed, screwed everything together, I ran the disc around manually, and I found out that for this particular one there was a bit of a ledge on here that would get caught. So I filed that down because none of the other ones had that. And so I'm just trying to get efficient operation of this unit. Also with these, when this large stack, when it would fully extend, it was like real tough because the plastic spacers were rubbing on each other. I just put a little bit of lube in there. That seems to work real good. So that moves properly. Let's see, the little spring I think is for probably a ground connection or whatnot, or this wire here. Put a little bit of lubrication on that. That worked out good. On the back side here, I did not push this in as far as it was before. I'm going to try it a little bit out, a little less pressure on it, so a little less wear and tear on things, and we'll see how it works. But soldered the motor back in, and everything seems to be working good. Up next, the score motor.